Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion, a poem that was requested by Kathy. This poem, the poem in question, is In Plaster by Sylvia Plath, and it's a bit of a long one, so we're going to get right into it. Just a reminder, real quick, there is a link to my personal channel to be found in the description below. This is where I talk about philosophy and things like that. If you want to help me out with what I'm doing here on the channel, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And hey, there's poetry every Monday here on Strip Cover Lit. Literature's the only thing I talk about. Poetry, short stories, novels, that sort of thing. Let's get back to it. In Plaster by Sylvia Plath. It reads as such: I shall never get out of this. There are two of me now. This new, absolutely white person and the old yellow one. And the white person is certainly the superior one. She doesn't need food. She is one of the real saints. At the beginning, I hated her. She had no personality. She lay in bed with me like a dead body, and I was scared because she was shaped just the way I was, only much whiter and unbreakable, and with no complaints. I couldn't sleep for a week. She was so cold. I blamed her for everything, but she didn't answer. I couldn't understand her stupid behavior. When I hit her, she held still like a true pacifist. Then I realized what she wanted was for me to love her. She began to warm up, and I saw her advantages. Without me, she wouldn't exist, so of course she was grateful. I gave her a soul. I bloomed out of her as a rose blooms out of a vase of not very valuable porcelain. And it was I who attracted everybody's attention, not her whiteness and beauty, as I had at first supposed. I patronized her a little, and she lapped it up. You could tell almost at once she had a slave mentality. I don't mind her waiting on me, and she adored it. In the morning, she woke me early, reflecting the sun from her amazingly white torso, and I couldn't help but notice her tidiness and her calmness and her patience. She humored my weakness like the best of nurses, holding my bones in place so they would mend properly. In our time, our relationship grew more intense. She stopped fitting me so closely and seemed offish. I felt her criticizing me in spite of herself, as if my habits offended her in some way. She let in the drafts and became more and more absent minded, and my skin itched and flaked away in soft pieces simply because she looked after me so badly. Then I saw what the trouble was. She thought she was immortal. She wanted to leave me. She thought she was superior, and I'd been keeping her in the dark, and she was resentful, wasting her days waiting on a half corpse. And secretly, she began to hope I'd die. Then she could cover my mouth and eyes, cover me entirely, and wear my painted face the way a mummy case wears the face of the pharaoh, though it's made of mud and water. I wasn't in any position to get rid of her. She'd supported me for so long I was quite limp. I had forgotten how to walk or sit, so I was careful not to upset her in any way or brag ahead of time how I'd avenge myself. Leaving her was like living with her was like living with my own coffin. Yet I still depended on her, though I did it regretfully. I used to think we might make a go of it together. After all, it was a kind of marriage, being so close. Now I see it must be one or the other of us. She may be a saint and I may be ugly and hairy, but she'll soon find out that doesn't matter a bit. I'm collecting my strength. One day I shall manage without her, and she'll perish with emptiness then and begin to miss me. So, one thing I just wanted to point out, Merriam Webster, in Plaster, idiom, British, a hard covering that protects a bone and allows it to heal in a plaster cast. So it is in plaster, the phrase does mean in a cast. But the one thing I really want to point out here, I really want to talk about a little bit, is that this seems to be so we know. So, okay. Sylvia Plath was one of, if not the best example of confessional poets. And one of the things that one of the reasons Sylvia Plath is so well remembered as a confessional poet is she confessed some really gnarly stuff. One of the stuffs that she confessed was the bad sides of motherhood, right? So we think mothers, mother dearest, these are characters beyond reproach. And Sylvia Plath was willing to put true light onto those matters. That it doesn't matter how much you love someone or want for someone's goodness, you will have selfish thoughts, you will have selfish feelings because you are a self. She was willing to admit that, and it sort of is one of these things that draws gasps from people who are. So I think there are some people who will not admit things to themselves because they think that is how you tempt yourself into committing bad acts. But when in reality, we all have terrible thoughts from time to time. We all think things we shouldn't think, half act on things we should not act on, upon which we should not act. All of these things. And the reason I bring that up in this poem is that this new white person. So whiteness and yellowness in the poem are sort of set up to yellow and dingy, right? The way that paper yellows when it gets older and used versus white, brand new white sheet of paper. It's interesting the way that the metaphor grafts out onto what it means to be a reader, what it means to be a writer. Writing paper, trust me, yellows a lot faster than reading paper. Paper in books, paper in notebooks yellows way faster than paper in print books. I have plenty of them, I can promise you. But that is the core metaphor there. The new person is stainless, is spotless, is pristine. The person that is our speaker is the old one, which is dingy, which is used. But it's interesting that this is titled in plaster. Plaster, presumably, would yellow too when older, would yellow too after use, would yellow too once it becomes dingy. But in plaster, a brace, a cast, helps you when you've fractured something. What has fractured here? Not a bone. Our speaker's personality has fractured. The plaster is to hold our speaker's personality together so that it may heal and heal properly. But what's going on is that it's not going to heal. Imagine you broke your wrist, and in the time that you were laid up with your wrist broke, you broke your ankle. I should say ankle. You broke your ankle. And in the time that you were laid up, because you couldn't be on your ankle, your foot decided, I think I'm going to give it a go. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, I'm going to do this life thing on my own. I'm going to I'm going to secede from the union of your body. Well, that'd be pretty troubling. But okay, so how do we fracture a bone? in a traumatic experience. How do we fracture a personality? In a traumatic experience. We have said traumatic experience, and we put on that face that has to face the world. You know what a normal person is and does simply through virtue of being socialized. We all know what a regular person does. And when you're not inside one of those regular people, what do? You create a regular people to show to other people. Because if you showed the other people the real you, the yellow one, things would go poorly. So it's just easier to create this shiny new personality, wrap it around your head like a cast, wrap it around your face like a cast, and take that into the new world, or out into the world. The new you that you have to make, that you had to do in order just to survive. Well, the old you is still there when that happens. You go through some traumatic experience, and the old you is still the you underneath, observing how other people are reacting to the new you that you created, just so that you wouldn't have to show people the old you. Well, what happens when that new you created out of trauma is way more popular than the old you? People like that you, not the real you, the one that you had to create. I think the only danger here, really, is the observation thereof. We all do this. We all do this. We've all created thousands of faces for ourselves over the years. The real problem is when we decide to acknowledge these different so here's where it'll pop up, and it pops up for a lot of people a lot of times, and they don't even notice it. You have a workplace. You show your boss one face, because we all do. Maybe it's just a little bit different, but it's probably different. You might not even notice how. That's slippery. And the person you work with most often, right? Maybe you hate one of them. Say it's the person you work with most often. You hate the guy you work with. And probably you hate your boss too, but you don't want him to know it. So you just kind of, oh, hey, how you doing? Right? One of these. The guy you work with all the time, you don't care if he knows you hate him. He probably hates you too. You're kind of a crappy person. Now, boss shows up unexpectedly, and you're there with the guy you work with all the time. Which personality do you use? When we have inconsistencies in our personalities, they no longer become a brace like they have in this poem. They become a liability. That is, I think, kind of what Sylvia Plath is getting at here. When that extra personality becomes a liability. Because what if everyone likes the new you a whole lot better? And probably they will. Don't you resent that new you? And much like motherhood, about which Sylvia Plath wrote in not the most endearing of terms all the time, wouldn't you get jealous and question where you belong in that dynamic? The real you. Where does the mother belong in the mother-daughter, mother-son, mother-child dynamic? Where does the mother belong in that? In the back seat, probably, right? But mother's a person too. Where do you belong in the dynamic of the you that you create? This poem is interesting because it does have little touches of the idea of motherhood, doesn't it? The new you was so worthless at first, just laid there like a dead body, couldn't do anything without you. It owes everything to you. But as that you grows, that little you, that new shiny you, as it grows, it's going to want more and more independence. It's going to start shutting its door before it goes to bed, right? So there's a lot of interesting dynamics with this poem. Like I say, I struggle with Sylvia Plath all the time. But poems like this, they are new takes on old things, cliches almost. Sort of like Shakespeare was real good at taking a cliche idea, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me, and putting a new little twist on it. Maybe love is your responsibility. Maybe you create this extra personality and you become jealous of how well it does. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. Look, I have poetry every Monday. So if you enjoy poetry, maybe stop back by. Maybe hit the subscribe button in order to stick around for more. And if you want to help me out with what I'm doing on this channel, hitting that like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. Tomorrow, I will be back with the 31st or 32nd chapter of Fairy Tale by Stephen King. So there's a read along for that on the channel if you were interested in that. And hey, I hope to have you back for the next one.